Hello and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia. I'm just going to walk us through this Titans game, have a brief conversation about the trade deadline, and then get out of here. So I want to first start talking about the special teams. I thought that was kind of the worst aspect of the game. I know that, there was the offensive line collapse and Joe Alt's injury and all that, but the special teams they're playing atrocious, and that's not going to get that national media attention. I think national media, they'll talk about Joe Alt a lot. They'll talk about Justin Herbert's pick six, Justin Herbert's scrambles, things like that. But my main takeaway from this game really is that the special teams are playing horribly. So we're going to get right into that. So starting with Rick Lovato, this must have been a PR for bad snaps in a single game. How many were there? 4, maybe 5 by the end? I can't believe that, J.K. Scott, first of all, that he handles all of that really well, but also, I can't believe that there hasn't been one that hasn't gone over his head or, actually bounced into the ground, because they are so consistently bad. I give J.K. Scott credit for handling them, but it can't stay this way. Now, Josh Harris did get the window opened up for him to return soon, but hasn't happened yet, and there's no guarantee that it happens before the Steelers game. They do not have to have him play. The window is bigger than that, so we'll see. But if he doesn't come back this week, that is just consistently going to worry me. Every single kick, I am afraid that he's just going to snap it over the head of J.K. Scott, and Cameron Dicker is just going to dive on the ball, and that'll be that. I cannot believe that we're having long snapper problems. That feels like such a Chargers problem to have. Of all the injuries that we could have, it's not just any offensive lineman. It's the guy who does the long snapping. It's the guy who nobody thinks about unless they are doing poorly. I think that the punt return touchdown, look, Shamir DK he's a really good returner. I don't mean to take anything away from him whatsoever. I think he was a great pick. But this was entirely on the Chargers, because the Chargers cannot break blocks. And obviously, they've had their struggles at tackling, but they don't read the play very well, and they can't break blocks. And both of those can't be true, because if you read the play poorly, but you can break blocks, you might be able to recover what you've missed. And sure, you'll give up some, but Shamir DK, after making one guy miss, I think he made Thule miss, and then he was pretty much untouched. As much as I want to give him credit for it so I don't have to look at the Chargers special teams and go, yeah, this is a problem, I think we have a ability to break blocks problem. And, Benjamin St-Juste, he was the gunner on one side, and he went really hard at his side, and that makes sense. I don't really fault him for that, but the other side, there was no containment whatsoever. You want to incentivize them to run up the middle so that they take hits early, but there was none of that. Anytime a guy can get all the way to the perimeter, something went really wrong. So that's something I think we have to keep looking out for. And it's not a great look on Ryan Ficken. We'll get to that in a second. But the problem also is that our kick returns aren't great. Our punt returns aren't great. And so not only are we losing out on the defending side, the kicking defense side, but we're also losing out on the return side. And so we end up just overall losing the field position game, even though our offense is playing well, if that makes sense. It feels like we are handing a disadvantage to our offense and handing an advantage to the opposing offense in every game. And that's one of those things that not many people are going to talk about. That the broadcasters probably aren't going to talk about that, because special teams doesn't usually involve the big name players and the big storylines. But this is quietly becoming a big problem, and I think it makes the Chargers defense look even worse. So it's been really disappointing that they haven't been able to figure that out. Darius Davis is only averaging 0.7 yards more per return than Keandre Lambert-Smith. Neither of them is doing great. I don't think they're doing horrible, to be clear, but this is an underrated aspect of this game. And I know Darius Davis has been above average overall in the past. He can be very hit or miss, a lot like J.K. Scott. It's like you either have an amazing play or one where you're like, what? Come on. If your average is so high, how can you have games like this? But that's just the reality. And on top of that, I don't think that they're getting great blocking. I don't think anything is going right. And so I can't just point to Darius Davis and say, well, this is the problem. If we can just, draft somebody who does this, then we don't have to think about it. But you could draft someone who does this, and then you're still not going to win the field position game. The blocking isn't magically going to get better, and all that. So that's a problem. I think because they have Cam Dicker and J.K. Scott, you can't say that, oh, this is one of the worst units in the league. Nah, so many teams would trade their entire unit for Cam Dicker. That so many teams, the amount of teams who missed extra points or missed field goals to lose games this year is ridiculous. I know on the other side of the coin, we're also having record-breaking kicks, over there, but a vast majority of the teams are not having good kicker play in terms of their averages. Obviously, kickers are better than ever in terms of their distance, but we have seen a lot of costly kicks that they all seem to come in the fourth quarter, and we're really lucky that Cameron Dicker's been able to handle stuff, but I don't know. How much more can we expect of J.K. Scott? How many more bad snaps do we expect him to take? I don't know. I think, back to Ryan Ficken, he's performed really well overall in his career for the Chargers. So for me, at least, he's earned some grace. I'm not, looking for them to replace him or anything. They maybe need to give him more resources. I would like in the draft, somewhere in the later rounds, get someone who can play special teams if you didn't get an early edge rusher who you also are okay with playing on special teams, because you're not getting special teams out of Bud Dupree. You're not getting special teams out of Odafe Owe, certainly not Khalil Mack. So, you have to look and go, well, since Kyle Kennard's not going there, where can we draw from? And right now there's no one. It once again makes me wonder why they kept Bud Dupree and not Caleb Murphy, but that's the reality, right? For some reason they thought they'd get him back after he made a few splash plays, and and I know Otito Ogbonia might make an impact on this, or it's not. Again, it's not just one thing would solve this, but they are going to have to give resources to Ryan Ficken and Jesse Minter, for that matter. It can't all go to Greg Roman. So special teams have been really disappointing. What hasn't been disappointing, at least for this game, was the defense. They allowed 6 points total. That's a great performance against anyone. I don't care who you're playing. You are playing an NFL team, and holding them to 6 points is really impressive. Obviously, the Titans scored more than 6 points, but it was not when the defense was on the field. So you can't hold that against them. And when you talk about the defense, obviously the first thing we got to talk about is Deion Henley having, a great day after having what he has described as the worst year of his life. I'm sure you all know by now, but his brother was shot and killed. I believe it was on Halloween, and he decided to play in the game anyways. And, we know what his family is and what his family history is, and he's been through it with that. So, for him to come out and have the performance he did, I thought was really good. And, maybe his coverage grade wasn't the best, but he had 7 tackles, he had a pass deflection, and we saw his reaction to his sack, just dropping to his knees. And I don't know, that I'm sure that made a lot of Chargers fans emotional. And I think that this all should contextualize his performance this year. I think we all tend to do worse at everything in a bad year. If you were having the worst year of your life, what would your performance at work or school be like realistically? And the reality is you might still be able to perform as well, but you're not going to be as consistent. And so I think with that in mind, we can't give up on Deion Henley. I think going into next year, I know there's been some talk about we need to draft a linebacker. I agree with that. But I think we need a linebacker more as a successor to Denzel Perryman than we do as a replacement for Deion Henley. I want depth, I want rotation, but I'm looking more for a, tough physical run-stopping guy rather than what Deion Henley is. Because I also, Deion Henley's a really young player. We've seen already what his ceiling is. I believe in him. And I think that the Chargers do too. They have consistently spoken highly of him. They know more about that background about his personal life than we do, and so they've been more in tune with this stuff. But I don't think that Chargers fans should give up on him. I hope he can bounce back and play well this year, but I think he's already doing better than anyone could expect given the circumstances, and I'm proud of him. I hope you guys are proud of him too. And the mistakes that he's made, it's mostly been intellectual mistakes. He's misread some run plays. The coverage hasn't always been great this year, at least. But it's not like he's not the same athlete. It's not like he suddenly can't tackle, suddenly can't, you know what I mean? He still has his speed, his quickness, athleticism. I fully believe that he will recover from this season and do really well in the future. And I hope that Chargers fans, I think mostly have been really positive about him coming after this game. But I also think for the season in general, we should be wary of being too negative about a guy going through the worst year of his life, as he described it. When Jim Harbaugh was asked about it, he said, with a real genuine passion in his eyes, he said it made him want to coach better than he ever had, for Deion and for the guys. And Henley said that, he had a lot of support from those guys on defense. He mentioned Naquan Jones being really supportive and Denzel Perryman. So again, it speaks to the closeness of this unit. That's something I've talked a bit about, but that stuff matters, and we'll get back into the team culture conversation in a little bit, but I just wanted to highlight that because I thought he had a good game, despite having kind of a rough year and obviously coming back from something really intense and personal and deciding that he was going to show up to work anyway. It's admirable. It shouldn't be expected. It isn't expected, but he honored his brother in the best way that he could for him. The defensive line, Odafe Owe, I thought he had a really good game, back-to-back sacks. I absolutely love seeing how, this trade has really worked well for both teams. I know we want to be like, oh, we're winning the trade, right? But really, when trades like this happen, you want them to work out for both teams. When these trades work out for both teams, essentially what you get is a future trade partner. When trades work out really poorly with a team, that may make people hesitant to trade with you in the future. And you might think, but aren't these organizations smarter than that? Won't they just go individual case by case? But a lot of these decisions aren't being made by a department. They're just being made by the GM. And you have to respect that GMs are emotional people like anyone else. Some of them are rational, some of them aren't, and all that. And I think it sends a good message to the league that when the Chargers are trading a player away, they have, they're not trying to fleece people. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good thing. And I'm glad that Elohe's working out for them. And I don't think he's done anything amazing, and I think you've already seen some of the issues that the Chargers had with him, but he does allow them to play Kyle Hamilton wherever they want, and I think that part of it is really valuable because Kyle Hamilton is so good. I thought Derwin James had a really good game. That was a fun tape to watch, and I think that's going to be really important moving forward. Obviously, Justin Aboigbe didn't get any sacks, but I thought that he looked really good against the run. And I think that's really important because Jamari Caldwell kind of had an off day. There wasn't really much noise from the interior. So, that run stopping ability, that's really important. And it's going to continue to be important. Thule got 3 pressures. Mac had 2, nothing amazing from them, but still some performance. And like I said, the more we keep Bud Dupree, God, I'm so tired of saying his name, off the field, the better. Overall, look, they held Cam Ward to 13 for 22 and 148 yards. That's solid. I know they gave up some big runs to Tony Pollard, but overall, if you hold an NFL team to 6 points, you've done your job, right? I don't have a lot of criticisms for the defense on this one. I really don't. The offense, yeah, I do. Obviously, the big takeaway for the offense is Joe Alt is hurt. That's it. Joe Alt is hurt. And I'll talk about the implications of that, or I'll go into the details on a future video. But for now, I think really the focus is on the interior, because that sack that they got toward the end of the first quarter was just awful. The interior of the offensive line, they weren't really fooled by what was happening. It wasn't that, oh, there was just a crazy stunt and then a completely open lane to get after Justin Herbert. And the Chargers outnumbered the Titans defenders. So what happened was Bradley Bozeman got entirely overwhelmed. Just entirely overwhelmed. He got run over, and what is he standing there preparing for if he's able to be run over so easily? Someone should have to bounce off of him. They should have to make a move that he gets beat by. They should have to run a stunt that confuses him. But no, they didn't need to do any of that because ultimately he just got run over. And this was a team without their best defensive tackle, right? Jeffrey Simmons was out. So this should not have happened. And obviously, I never want to disrespect any NFL unit, but the Titans defense should not have been able to do this. They really shouldn't. Foster Sarell allowed 6 pressures. Bozeman allowed that sack like I talked about, and man, the tape looks so bad on him. Joe Alt didn't play great, but I think 2 pressures allowed from left tackle isn't a huge problem. Obviously, it's not ideal, but, all the pressure from the interior is what makes that suffocating. Because if all you have is something from the outside, Justin Herbert's great at escaping. He can step up in the pocket. He didn't do a great job escaping today, but Joe Alt is clearly not the problem on this offensive line. Unfortunately, he's the solution, and the solution is out for the season. So at least that's the reports that I'm seeing, that he's out for the season. I know the Chargers were kind of ambiguous about it, but the NFL is reporting that he is out, and that is devastating. Trey Pipkins was fine in pass protection, but his run blocking looked atrocious when I watched it back. I don't know what it is, man. First he gets outplayed by Bobby Hart, and then the second he's benched and then has to come in because Bobby Hart is out, he doesn't look the same. It's unfortunate because starting off the year, he looked decent at tackle at least. We know he struggles at guard. I don't know. I am disappointed in Trey Pipkins, and I'm really curious what the Chargers are going to do with him next year. Justin Herbert's pick 6 obviously was horrible. It was so clear who he was throwing to. The defender wasn't even the guy covering Keenan Allen. I believe he was covering Rondé Gadsden, and he just entirely abandoned his coverage because Justin Herbert was only looking at Keenan Allen. It was just a really bad pick that you don't see often from Justin Herbert. Usually his picks require that it was a tipped pass and he was hit and, someone was out of position. Usually something really bad has to happen for Justin Herbert to throw a pick. And he's had a lot of bad luck with that this year because of his offensive line can't get their hands on the right pad level, and defenders can just forego going after Justin Herbert and put their hands up because that's what happens when you have a bad offensive line. But I thought Justin Herbert recovered really well from that pick. Obviously, he had a bit of a slow start in the first half, but I thought he did a great job. And, when Justin Herbert takes off and runs and he trucks guys and gets a first down and you see him on the ground with that little first down, with his hands, I don't know, it gets the team hyped. I love to see it. I know it doesn't feel good to see him take hits, but I don't care. Justin Herbert's, he's taking hits anyways. It's a ticking time bomb when he gets hurt. He may as well take hits on his terms that get first downs instead of sacks. I'm okay with it. And I thought his touchdown pass to his touchdown pass to Quentin Johnston was just perfect. It was beautiful, and I love that he trusted QJ with that. That's the exact kind of pass that I would not have trusted QJ with last year or the year before. I really wouldn't have, because, QJ had shown that those deep throws when he has to look back over his shoulder, he's not going to bring those in. But he brought this one in with his hands. It was a great catch, great play. I don't want Justin Herbert to get conservative with his throws just because he's had more picks this year. I'm okay with a player making big mistakes because they're taking big swings, as long as they're also making contact sometimes, if that makes sense. And Justin Herbert, he plays hero ball almost every single game. He's allowed to throw an interception. Was it really bad? Yeah, but I don't want him to get less aggressive. I just want him to learn from it. If instead of staring down Keenan Allen, he had acted like his first read was on the other side of the field, if he had pivoted and read what was happening and thrown to Gadsden instead, he has things that he can learn from that tape. I'm not too worried about it. He spread the ball out a lot to all of the receivers today. It's something that the Chargers are routinely doing. They all look really good. That unit is proving to be really dependable. Trey Harris continues to look good and play physical. That role should only increase going forward. Like I've talked about, we need to see everything that we have from him. Every time he catches the ball, he looks like he's going out of his way to truck a guy, and I love it. Obviously that goes with him being a really good blocker. Now, Keenan Allen did not get the Antonio Gates record like I assumed he would. My bad. My bad, guys. But hey, the good news is that means that next week against the Steelers, he can get that record at home. So let me know if any of you are planning on going to that game, and because you're going to see some history, and that's really cool. Obviously, he needs one more reception to tie it and then 2 more to surpass it, which I am pretty certain he'll do. Other than that, Kamani Vidal didn't do quite as well as I had hoped. The Titans aren't great at stopping the run, and I think, Kamani Vidal, he could have done better. Ultimately, I would say that the offensive line did everything they could to help the Titans defense stop the run. I genuinely think that is the best way to characterize it. Combined with the fact that Greg Roman insists on running Kimani Vidal up the middle, I don't think that that's Kimani's skill set. I think he's better on the outside. He's better with quick passes. Occasionally up the middle, I understand to kind of have a change of pace, but not when you need it, and that's, as much as I want to say that's something that needs to change, I don't think that it's trending that way. Patterson had a kind of up and down game. We saw some flashes from him, and I'm glad that he's kind of working out for them and is doing what they need him to, but ultimately I would be happy if the Chargers come away from today with a new running back, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about the trade deadline. I don't know how hard Joe Ortiz is going to go with being a buyer at the deadline. I'm not sure that I see the Chargers as buyers at this point. With Joe Alt done for the year, obviously, losing Alt and Slater, I think most teams would be worse if they lost their two best offensive linemen, especially with the way the Chargers depend on them because of the weakness of the interior. And on top of that, Mekhi Becton has proven that he is not a there everyday guy, and in fact, he's a barely there guy, and that sucks, and they don't have the depth behind him. Do I want them to make a trade for depth? Yeah, but the Chargers cannot afford to trade away the future. They can't, and any offensive lineman they can get at this point probably won't move the needle too much. I would like to see them get someone who can play tackle, but the interior is the problem, and when your interior is the problem, it's like, what, are you going to replace 3 guys? No, you can't. And I don't think they want to replace Zion, but they have shown that they're fine with Bozeman, and Foster Sorrell looks absolutely terrible, and I don't know. I guess I don't feel confident that they're going to do something about it. I'll be happy if they do, but like I've talked about, they have more cap space next year. They barely have any left for this year. And they don't have a lot of trades. They don't have a lot of drafts to trade. And so, maybe they can move some 2027 picks, but at some point they're just going to have to eat the situation that they're in and not trade for, too much. And before anyone says, oh, the Chargers should tank. No, they should not. They absolutely should not tank. Anything can happen, and they're still, they're 6-3. They're in a decent position to get in the postseason. I think about how the Commanders got to the AFC Championship in year 1 of Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels, and it's not because they were an amazing team. It's because they got hot at the right time. I think we've seen now how the Commanders aren't an amazing team, despite getting more players and building up their roster more in Dan Quinn's idea of how that should be done. But, like the Chargers, all it took was some injuries, and then they were kind of brought back down to earth. And I think it shows that, obviously these injuries hurt, but anything could happen at any time. The Chargers could get hot later in the season. And before anyone says, yeah, but this isn't their Super Bowl window, I agree with you. I agree that it's not. Year 2 of a regime, that's not a dependable Super Bowl window by any means. But any team can get hot at any time, and if the Chargers get hot and win a couple playoff games, that makes them a more desirable place for players to play. That matters for re-signing guys. They have a lot of people that they are going to have to decide if they want to re-sign, and attracting new free agents and attracting UDFAs and things like that we don't think a lot about because we're not in the locker room. When there's a loss, we don't have to live with it. We're not the ones putting our bodies on the line for a win and then coming away with nothing. That kind of thing can really set a coach back, can really set a culture back. I think the Chargers have done a really good job with their culture so far, and they should not do anything that jeopardizes that. I know they could get a better pick. Joe Ortiz has shown that he does really well with whatever picks he has. And so I think he is going to be more concerned about getting a higher number of picks as opposed to higher picks. I will not be surprised if he trades down. In fact, I'll be surprised if he doesn't trade down because the Chargers need more picks than they have. Anything could happen today, but we got to have the future in mind. Any offensive lineman, running back, defensive lineman, they're all on the table for the Chargers, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be a good deal. People are still clamoring for Breece Hall, and I think the price on him has gone way up, and I don't know, we can't afford to take bad deals. So it is what it is. I'll probably make a video about the state of the Chargers in general at this point of the season, post the trade deadline and all that, so that I can react to any trades that do happen and just kind of set us up for understanding what we should expect for the rest of the season, what we're looking for, what we're hoping for. And I apologize for not posting as quickly or as much this week. Had a very busy weekend and I'm working more because college football is ramping up, but I will be back to talk about the state of the Chargers, like I said, and to preview the upcoming Steelers match. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate. I'm starting to see some familiar names and faces in the comment section, so I really appreciate you guys. Feel free to like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen today, and I'll see you guys soon.